Star Trek: The Next Generation, Starfleet Academy, Book Number 5, Atlantis Station, Chapter 1. Geordi LaForge hurried along the corridor toward Starfleet Academy's shuttle pad. He wasn't quite running, because running would get him a lecture from any passing instructor or upperclassman, and then he would be really late. But he wasn't exactly walking either. If only his warp dynamics class hadn't run overtime again, he wouldn't be 10 minutes late. It would be just like Lieutenant Moldov, the teacher who organized this field trip, to order the shuttle out on schedule. Geordi groaned and increased his speed. He had to be on that shuttle. By the time he'd gotten around to signing up for the class field trip, there had been only 3 spaces left. Today was the one time when he didn't have a test in another class. He should have signed up earlier, Geordi knew. Doing well in Lieutenant Moldov's introduction to planetary exploration was mandatory for any cadet who wanted to get ahead in Starfleet. In fact, Geordi had heard it whispered doing well in exploration was more important than the legendary Kobayashi Maru test. After all, Starfleet had plenty of jobs for people who failed their command officer testing, but there wasn't much one could do if one didn't know how to investigate strange environments. It was just that Lieutenant Moldov's class wasn't his favorite. Perhaps because he saw things so much differently than everyone else, the class seemed almost irrelevant. Geordi couldn't remember when he hadn't felt like he was exploring an exotic world. Warp dynamics, on the other hand, was so alien, so much a world of the mind, that most of his classmates were more disadvantaged than Geordi. After the struggle to imagine the world around him before he got his visor, visualizing how a ship's warp drive affected the universe was a fascinating game. The door leading to the landing pad whisked open. Geordi scanned the area with his visor. The visor, a visual instrument and sensory organ replacement device, compensated for his blindness. The sensory inputs spotted the telltale heat sources that told him where his classmates were. He threaded his way through the shuttles until he reached the one assigned to his group. It was an aqua shuttle, more compact and streamlined than the standard atmospheric craft. "It is about time you got here." The open hostility in the soft lisping voice made Geordi cringe. Ven of Almedixarian was an Andorian. He had blue skin and shoulder-length white hair. Small, curved antennae on the top of his head gave him extremely sensitive hearing. Like all his people, he was hot-tempered and quick in his judgments. But there were many Andorians who were not hot-tempered and quick in judgments. Geordi didn't know how, but he had offended Ven on the first day of class. Their relationship had gotten worse as the semester progressed. "He is 12.3 minutes late." Tavarian, the dark-haired Vulcan girl, deliberately ignored Geordi. Her upswept eyebrows lowered as she turned toward the shuttle's controls. "I shall note the reason for our deviation from the filed flight plan in the ship's log." "I'm sorry I'm late." Geordi threw himself into the unoccupied seat, panting for breath. "Jessen Dow kept class late again." "Honorable Jessen Dow never keeps our class over. It is most shameful to hide one's mistakes behind the story of teachers' offenses." Yoshi Nakamura looked over his shoulder at Geordi, his expression as bland as Tavarian's. Yoshi was from a colony world settled by traditionalist Japanese, Geordi remembered. He seemed determined to make his classmates behave like 16th century samurai. Worse still, he couldn't believe anything that differed from his own experience. Gritting his teeth to keep from arguing, Geordi buckled his safety harness. How had he gotten stuck on the same field trip as the 3 most obnoxious cadets in the class? He checked to see who else was in the shuttle. Amray and Amriel Stenarios sat in the rear seats. Both girls had dark eyes and dark curly hair tied back in ponytails. Their identical olive-skinned faces were identical expressions of long-suffering patience. They were clones, 2 of 6 genetically identical girls. They usually stuck together and rarely had much to say. Geordi didn't think they could read each other's minds, but their teamwork was close enough to make some of his classmates wonder. The other two cadets were Lissa Jordan and Todd Devereaux. Geordi didn't know either of them very well. Lissa was tall and slender with short copper-colored hair. Her huge flashing smile always made Geordi's palms sweat. In fact, that happened even when she wasn't smiling at him. Todd was shorter than Geordi and had blonde hair and blue eyes. On the first day of class, he'd announced that he was going to be Starfleet's finest captain, better even than the legendary James T. Kirk. Most of Geordi's friends laughed at Todd's claims, but Geordi didn't know Todd well enough to know if he could succeed. The shuttle shivered as Ven brought the engines to full power. Geordi wiggled himself into a more comfortable position as Ven cleared the Aqua shuttle for launch. Within moments, they were airborne and on their way. As the shuttle soared through the sky, Geordi took out his pad to read his assignment. The class had been split into teams of 8. Each group, like a starship's away team, was given its mission as it left the academy. After the field trip, each cadet would write a report, just as Starfleet officers did when they described what they found on new planets. Geordi grinned as he read the words on his screen. His team was assigned to visit Research Station Atlantis. 2 centuries earlier, volcanic eruptions had formed a new island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It had been named Isla del Fuego, Island of Fire. To study the new island and the mid-Atlantic ridge near it, scientists had built Atlantis Station. He continued reading. The main station, built on the island, had workspace for 50 to 75 scientists. These people explored the island and its volcano, the ocean around it, and the nearby ocean floor. For Geordi, the undersea dome was the most interesting part of the station. It was located almost 2 kilometers below the surface of the ocean. The 30 people assigned there lived and worked in the strangest, most dangerous place on Earth. They were over halfway to the station before Geordi realized that Ven was still flying the shuttle. "We're supposed to trade off the pilot's duties." His voice was sharp with protest. According to the duty roster, Ven should have given him command of the shuttle 15 minutes ago. "I only fly with qualified pilots," Ven said in a tone that implied that only he was qualified. "The computer aboard this shuttle does not show a passing score on your flight tests." "My scores are higher than yours, and you know it. I had the top qualifying scores on the navigation specialty tests this year." Learning to interpret the flight controls through his visor had not been easy. To earn his high scores, he'd spent many extra hours practicing his piloting skills. Geordi squeezed his fist against his leg. He'd been looking forward to piloting a real shuttle instead of the Academy's training ships. Still, it wouldn't do to lose his temper, even if Ven had somehow deleted his flight rating from the shuttle's computer. "We changed the piloting schedule before you arrived." Tavarian's tone was absolutely neutral. "It is illogical for you to assume that your tardiness will go unpunished." "That's not your job." Geordi caught himself before he said the words aloud. Arguing with them would not change their minds. All they could do was control his temper and excel on the rest of the assignment. He began reading again. After losing points for not taking his turn as pilot, he needed much higher scores on everything else. He had his work cut out for him. Chapter 2. Ven was still piloting the shuttle when they arrived at Isla del Fuego. Except for Geordi and the Stenarios clones, the other cadets had traded off the co-pilot's duties. Amril and Amray insisted on working as a team, but Ven refused to let anyone replace him as pilot. Geordi wondered how soon the shuttle's computer would grade the Andorian down for interfering with his classmates' work. Despite Geordi's worries, Ven landed the shuttle like an experienced pilot. The door slid upward, letting a warm breeze into the cabin. Geordi took a deep breath. The air smelled of salt, seaweed, and a hint of sulfur. Eagerly, he unbuckled his safety harness and hurried outside. The sunlight was so bright, that temporarily overloaded his visor. Everything was white, hot, too intense for him to sort out. The blazing light translated into fiery needles jabbing through his head. "Quit blocking the door!" Someone bumped Geordi from behind. He thought it was Ven, but the pain from the light made it hard to be sure. "If you cannot see what you're doing, get out of the way!" Someone else pushed past him on the other side. Geordi stumbled and lost his balance. He went down on his hands and knees. The crushed gravel of the landing field burned into his palms. Before he could react, hands grasped his shoulders. "Are you all right?" The girl's voice was unfamiliar. Struggling to get his bearings, Geordi straightened to a kneeling position. He wasn't hurt, at least not seriously. One of his knees felt scraped, even through his uniform, but he wasn't going to admit that right now. If what had happened was an accident because everyone was too impatient to get outside, he didn't want to call any more attention to himself. His only real problem was the brilliant sunshine. Carefully, he adjusted the inputs from his visor, setting the sensitivity to a lower level. The landing field was one of the few level areas on the island. To the north, the black mass of the volcano towered over them. Geordi's visor told him the summit was hotter than the rest of the mountain. He thought he saw steam rising from the volcano's mouth. In the opposite direction, foam-tipped waves rolled onto the beach. "Are you all right?" the new girl asked again. "Yeah, I'm fine." Geordi thought his voice sounded a little shaky. Luckily, no one else noticed. He stood quickly before anyone decided to help him. The girl stepped away and faced the group. She was short and had long dark hair. Her skin was deeply tanned from spending long hours in the hot sun. Much to Geordi's surprise, she was wearing a Starfleet cadet's uniform. "Welcome to Atlantis Station. I'm your guide, Leilani Kamehameha. I'm a science specialist at the Academy, and I was assigned here for my senior project." She started toward the cluster of low tan buildings opposite the landing field. "You're very lucky to be visiting just now. We're getting some very exciting results in our work." Inside the station, everything was cool and dim. With a sigh of relief, Geordi readjusted the inputs from his visor. Even with the trouble the device sometimes gave him, working without all the information it showed him was harder still. He was used to the visor, and he needed it to see the world around him. Geordi had been born blind, without optic nerves to carry information from his eyes to his brain. The scientists who designed his visor gave him the best vision they could create. The device scanned the electromagnetic spectrum from infrared through ultraviolet, reading a far wider range of frequencies than a normal person could. The visor fed that information directly into Geordi's brain. Sometimes, having to sort through the extra information gave him a headache, but he figured it was worth it. The visor showed him things about his world that no one else could see. Leilani gave them a moment to look around. They were in a large entry hall with a high ceiling. Brightly colored posters and displays covered every inch of wall space. A scale model of the island filled the center of the room. "This is our main display area," Leilani said. "The Isla del Fuego Visitor Center receives over 50,000 visitors a year. Of course," she paused, smiling, "most of them don't get the tour you're about to get." "They probably don't have to write a paper either," Todd said to Lissa under his breath. Leilani focused an even wider smile on Todd, and his cheeks grew hot from embarrassment. Todd hadn't intended his comment for anyone but Lissa. Actually, many of them do. Most of our visitors are students on class field trips. Isla del Fuego provides a unique opportunity to study the formation of an island and to observe how plant and animal populations evolve over time. Students in geology, biology, botany, ecology, and oceanography all gain valuable insights from the work we do on Isla del Fuego. She studied the group. "Does anyone have any questions?" When no one did, she continued, "In that case, I'll give you your communicators and we can begin your tour." Leilani went to a console near the door. Geordi was the first person in line. She took a communicator from the drawer and touched it to a sensor pad. After telling the computer how long he would be on the island, she gave the communicator to him. While he waited for the others, Geordi examined the model of the island. Isla del Fuego was a single volcano, a massive pile of rock built up from the ocean floor nearly 3 miles below. Most such volcanoes never reached sea level. Of those that did, many did not survive the ceaseless battering of the ocean's waves. Within a few years, the new islands were worn down below sea level and never seen again. Against the odds, Isla del Fuego had grown into permanent land. The island had an oval shape with the summit of the mountain to the west. The field where they had landed was the largest patch of level ground on the island, and most of Atlantis Station had been built in the area. A few structures were located elsewhere on the island. The model was incredible. With all the details it showed, Geordi could have spent the rest of the day studying it. Suddenly, he felt very small and unimportant. The universe held so many surprises and promised so many exciting adventures that he would need dozens of lifetimes to explore all the possibilities. How could he ever learn enough to get through his academy classes and become a Starfleet officer? Leilani stepped in front of the model. Let me introduce you to Isla del Fuego, the island of fire. Most of you have seen our display. This is an accurate scale model of the island, showing every lava flow and volcanic vent. Our people worked very hard to keep it up to date. How difficult can that be? Mountains aren't like cities. People don't rebuild them every week. Lissa's puzzled tone reminded Geordi that she came from Holloway Base. Built on an airless moon, the landscape outside the base's dome was sterile and unchanging. Leilani explained, Isla del Fuego is on the most active part of the mid-Atlantic ridge. The seafloor here spreads at the rate of 2 to 3 centimeters per year. She paused, grinning. That doesn't sound very fast, but it's enough. As the ridge pulls apart, hot rock from deep inside the earth fills the gap. Some of that rock piled up here until it formed this island. Anyone who has taken a beginning geology class knows that. Tavarian's tone implied that the information was so basic that every grade school child knew it. On Vulcan, they probably do, Geordi thought. His sister Ariana had gone to school with a Vulcan girl for a while, and Tellura had been several years younger than her classmates. Leilani's face flushed with anger, but her voice remained calm. That's true. However, people often have trouble connecting what they learn in class with the world around them. It's especially difficult in geology, where the things we study are so large. Tavarian flipped her bangs out of her eyes. Can we not assume that everyone has heard this elementary lecture and proceed to something interesting? Geordi tried to remember enough from his geology class to ask an intelligent question. While he was thinking, help came from an unexpected source. Please continue with lecture, Honorable Leilani, Yoshi said. Humble students should show more patience in learning history of island. Honorable Leilani? Todd whispered. Geordi shrugged. Yoshi's manners were excessive, but he was glad no one else heard Todd. Finally, he thought of a question. How often has the volcano erupted? There have been 10 major eruptions since Isla del Fuego rose from the ocean 215 years ago. Leilani flashed Geordi a grateful smile. In between major eruptions, the volcano shows occasional activity at the summit. You're in luck. 2 lava fountains started erupting last night. Will it be possible for us to see them? Judging from Ben's tone, he really wanted to see the volcano erupt. That surprised Geordi. The Andorian didn't seem interested in the sciences. From what Geordi had seen, Ben preferred to order his classmates around. He clearly saw himself as a future starship captain. However, Geordi didn't want to serve under him. Ben was too sure of his own abilities and too quick to condemn others. Leilani nodded yes to Ben's question. We'll fly around the mountain and see the fire fountains. Before that, though, we'll tour the station's research labs. I think you'll enjoy seeing how we study the inside of the volcano. With that, she started down the corridor. Geordi and his classmates fell in line behind her. The deep imaging lab was an engineer's dream. The gleaming consoles, flashing monitors, and complex equipment begged for someone to put them through their paces. Geordi stood in the door admiring everything. He wished he had a week to learn how each device worked. It wasn't the first time he'd had a clear picture of where he wanted to go in Starfleet. Like most cadets, Geordi was overwhelmed by the range of specialties Starfleet offered him, but he knew what he wanted. He wanted to be the person who made everything work. Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge. Yes, it had a nice ring to it. Someday, that was who he was going to be. However, he realized, someday was a long way off. At the moment, he'd better pass this class. And the screen tells us what's happening inside the volcano, Leilani was saying. The colors show the temperature of the rocks below the surface. Geordi moved closer to the monitor. It showed a cutaway view of the mountain. A vertical strip of bright yellow ran from the bottom of the screen to the mouth of the volcano. It could have been a picture straight from his geology text. Leilani pointed to several consoles on the far wall. The best way for you to understand this is to analyze the problem. These workstations receive data from our sensor arrays on the mountain. For the next hour, you will be a science team exploring a new planet. Your mission is to study this volcano and prepare a report for your captain. Each of you should prepare your own analysis in addition to the group report. Leilani grinned at them. Good luck, she said as she left the room.